Ah, well, we'll start with John in Connecticut. You're on with Matt and Gail. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome. What do you got for us?
So, I just have a problem I would like a little guidance with, and I was hoping maybe you can help me out with that. So, just a little introduction. I was raised Catholic, but it has the whole religion just had a very negative influence on my whole life. I would even say that it ruined a good part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to leave the religion. I would just like to forget about it, but the problem is I can't help but be convinced of the existence of God for various reasons. And I was hoping maybe you could give me, maybe, I don't know, poke holes in the arguments or something, just to give me a little advice.
I'm always happy to try to poke holes in arguments in favor of religion. So what's like the biggest thing that keeps you convinced that there's a God?
Okay, there's two. I would say that there's two categories. One is the logical, philosophical argument, and the other one is personal experience. But I'll start with the logical, philosophical one.
Okay.
So, you know how there's the argument from contingency that the universe has to have a non-contingent cause, like an uncaused cause, and that's what keeps me chained to this faith, because I feel like, I feel like there's no argument against that. Like how can you explain matter and energy without a supernatural first cause?
So what you're doing here is saying, hey, there's a puzzle. We don't know how or why there's something instead of nothing. And then you're saying, how could you possibly explain that with anything other than a supernatural origin? Well, I'm not convinced that a supernatural appeal solves the problem, but you're assuming that you, in fact, have an explanation or should have an explanation. And it seems to me that perhaps the best right answer is we don't know why there's something rather than nothing. We just know that there is, because the path that you go down with contingency arguments is, okay, well, it's contingent on something. What can I say about that something? What are the characteristics or the qualities of that? And all of that is just speculative. Like, even if it was required that there was some thinking agent being who had to think the universe or reality into existence, there's nothing that says that being still exists, or that it cares about who you are or what you do, or has relayed any information to anybody else. So even those arguments don't get you to anything close to religion. And so what you wind up with is a big placeholder. Hey, I need an explanation for this. And so this God explanation seems to work, but how many others might work? Universe creating pixies, or a multiverse type of explanation.
Right. Well, that's not very important to me, because personally, I've researched all religions, and I don't like.
That's a lie.
Either of them. Like, I don't want.
You don't like either of them. You've really researched all religions, and you don't like either of them.
Well, the mainstream ones like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, even Hinduism. It's just I find them. I just find them to be. I'm trying to find a nice word. They're not appealing.
Okay. Well, sometimes the truth isn't appealing, so that doesn't seem to be a very good argument for you dismissing all those religions. But what then are you left believing?
Well, since I can't explain the existence of matter and energy without.
Me neither. I can't explain it with the supernatural explanation either. The supernatural doesn't have any explanatory power. You're trying to solve a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery. And all you're doing in that case is making yourself feel more comfortable and pretend like you have a better explanation when you don't.
I see. That's a good point. Then I guess I'll ask the second part of my question. I mean, the second thing, which keeps me believing, it may sound kind of silly, but I believe I've had personal experiences that are supernatural. One main one that I keep having are synchronicities, and like every time I have them, they just stress me out because I interpret them as like a sign from God that like He is real and that I should believe it and that I should keep following this religion. So that's the other thing.
John, you've put with the way you explained your question and presented your question, you've put a lot of thought and study into this. I can tell that you knew the answer to those questions before you asked them. My question back to you, I understand that you're trying to do the reasonable, logical thing. You're trying to tell yourself repeatedly, this doesn't make sense, this is unreasonable, but you're having these weirdness about the whatever it was you said. You started your conversation by saying how detrimental religion was to your life. In fact, you used language that said it ruined parts of your life. And my question to you is, as you have done this journey away, can you be patient with yourself? Is it interfering in your life that you've got this constant scroll across your brain saying maybe God's real, maybe God's real? Is it interfering with your life? Can you be patient with yourself enough to go, you know what? Every time those feelings arise, every time those thoughts come to your mind, if you say, I know it's not reasonable, but it's still there. That's the insidious nature of religion. That's what indoctrination is. That's what it does to us, is it plants thoughts in our brain. And so could you be patient enough with yourself to just let those thoughts come and go and continue to remind yourself that this is not real, this is not reasonable? Is it interfering in your life much?
It is a pretty big source of stress for me right now, because it's like I can ignore all the laws, because I mean it's the laws which stress me out the most. Like I can ignore them and just do my own thing anyway, but then it's like it's like I have that fear in the back of my mind, like, oh, like this is not allowed, like, oh, what if God is real? What's going to happen to me? Is He going to punish me now? Like I can't enjoy certain things because like it's always in the back of my mind, and it's very depressing.
Yeah. So first of all, you seem to be a prime candidate for benefiting from recovering from religion. The one issue I want to make on like the synchronicity thing. We have a massive tendency to look for and find agency even when agency isn't involved. And the sort of coincidental things that happen in life, it's very desirable for us to find a pattern so that the world doesn't feel as potentially random and indifferent to us as it may well be. An interesting one, I won't tell you the person's name, but I have a friend that I haven't spoken to in a few months, and last night or the night before, I was watching documentaries and stuff on Amazon Prime, I think it was, and in the credits for this documentary was this person's name as an executive producer for this particular documentary. And within 10 minutes of me seeing that person sent me a text message. Now, it's very easy for me to look at that and see how other people can go, oh, wow, there's this amazing coincidence. And yes, it is. But for me to say there must be something behind it that's, causing these things to be, aligned is just a mistake. Because I would also have to look at all of the other times I heard or thought of that person's name and they didn't send me a text message or a call. And if you were trying to use the synchronicity of an event as an argument for believing that there's some governing mind behind all of this, wouldn't you also, if you're going to be intellectually honest, have to take every instance where there wasn't synchronicity and compile those as arguments against a God governing?
I never thought of it like that. I mean, I guess it's a good point.
Everybody's had the experience, especially older people, when phones still hung on the wall. Almost everybody's had the experience of having the phone ring and just knowing who it was before you picked it up, and you're right. The thing is, how many times did you think you knew who it was and you were wrong? How many times did you not think you knew who it was and, it was either unexpected or you portray it into this? These sorts of things happen. And it's not always a mistake to look for a pattern, but when you get into that hyper pattern recognition mode where you're looking for connections everywhere, that's the type of thinking that leads to conspiracy theorist stuff. It's the type of thinking that leads to becoming convinced of the supernatural and religious claims, even when there isn't actually evidence for it. And one of the questions that I think may be useful isn't necessarily how many times has this happened where I didn't recognize it, or how many times did I not recognize it otherwise. What is the purpose? Like, let's assume that my synchronicity example is actually evidence for a God mind or something. What purpose would this God have of synchronizing these events? Me watching a documentary and getting a text message.
I feel like he's doing that to warn me, to let me know that, that he does exist, and that's why he's causing these things to happen, because.
But does that make sense? Because if God wants you to know he exists, how difficult would it be for God just to reveal himself directly to you, to let you know that he exists?
That's true. I thought about that too.
Yeah, why has God got to play charades? And it's very much, and I don't mean this to be insulting to you or anybody else, but we're all familiar with the scenario of like an unrequited love scenario, where there's someone that you have a crush on, and you start to see things from them, and the confirmation bias builds up that, well, maybe they like me too. And the only way to know whether or not they actually like you, or whether you're building this up in your head, is to have a conversation with them and then judge things based on that conversation and the actions that follow. And so even if God is out there saying, you know what, I'm gonna make him make a wrong turn and meet this person over here in order to make this connection, and then he'll know that I know and love and care about him, that's preposterous, because if God wants you to know that he loves and cares about you, he can just tell you and show you, and not play puppet master hiding in the bushes.
Yes, that's true.
A God that worked like that, wouldn't that God be like a dick?
Yeah, I totally agree. But
kind of an ass. Yeah. An ass. We'll go with ass. Not that there's anything wrong with asses either. But it's kind of what's happened here is that religious ideas have taken hold in your head and have triggered your particular fears, whether they be about loneliness or whether you're loved or cared for, and religion plays on those things. And now you start to see what it is that you need to see or want to see, and just start asking yourself the questions: does this make any sense? Why couldn't God just, I don't. It reminds me of the people who look at the Bible and say, "Oh, well, God authorizes all kinds of horrific shit, but He had to speak to people at that time in a way that they could understand." Well, no. He's God. He should be able to speak to anybody at any time, and they should understand Him. If God can talk to people and they can't understand Him, isn't that God's fault anyway for making us incapable of understanding Him?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, then you're probably right. But don't just take one phone call and one little conversation and go charging off, because I think that's probably how you got in this mess in the first place, is not pausing to think things through. So I'd recommend reaching out to recoveringfromreligion.org. There's chat services there. There's the hotline. And I know we didn't mention it earlier, but my good friend Anthony Magnabosco, famous for the street epistemology stuff, has been training some of the volunteers.
Some of our agents. And so, John, let me encourage you you can call the number. You can do the online chat if you prefer that. You also will have the opportunity to join an online community where you can... Your thoughts are valid. Your concern is valid. Even your fear is valid. It's, as I said, it's what religion does. And talking through it and reminding yourself that it's not reasonable, and talking to someone else and expressing all that.
It's just a philosophical question keeps coming up, like, how can there be something rather than nothing?
Isn't the right answer, I don't know?
Yes, but
It's not a very comforting answer,
no.
but it's the right
I
one.
mean, at a certain point, you just have to, because the way I think is, okay, so the universe is composed of matter and energy. Matter and energy don't explain themselves. So what else can there be that I mean, it's just, sorry. It just like, I just feel like it just has to be something outside of matter and energy.
But you know reasonably and logically, John, you can explain those answers as good as Matt could. When you presented your question, you know the logical, reasonable answer. What you're having is an emotional response to this trauma that you had as a believer, believing these things. And I am assuming that because this keeps coming to your mind unbidden, that this is connected to your fear of judgment, your fear of hell. Of course. And so you know all of that. You know it all on a logical sense. This is just an emotional thing that you have to let your logical mind overtake your emotional experience. And that's why I think going to some kind of a helpline or a chat line or being in a community where you can talk this through will help reinforce what it is you know to be true.
Yes.
And on that note,
Thank you.
I'm gonna move us on to other callers. I'm glad you found this helpful, and we hope that you, even if you don't reach out to Recovering from Religion, finding an organization and people in your area so that you can have a conversation about these things is great. And if there isn't already a group in your area, then there's the possibility to potentially start one.
Absolutely.
Our little organization started with an ad in a newspaper and some people meeting at a coffee shop, and now it's a global empire that I am now in charge of as the puppet master. I just have somebody will clip that out and put it in the next conspiracy video. But anyway, thanks, John.